Contra Amatores Mundi is a 2024 novella by Graham Thomas Wilcox. This is actually a Latin phrase that means against the lovers of the world, which is interesting how it plays in the story. But anyways, it's actually a title taken from a sermon by Richard Rolle, a late medieval English hermit and mystic. And the book opens with an epigram by Algernon Charles Swinburne's Tristram of Lyonesse, and it starts itself actually with a confusing amount of information in a very short chapter 1, but we learn the narrator, speaking in first person, killed the Knight of the Foxes on a ship at sea with someone named Prospero, like from The Tempest. He then descends below the sea to a fantastical land. He stops to tell us of his lover, Walpurga, from that famous night at the end of April named for an Anglo-Saxon, or I guess maybe Anglo-British would be a better label, saint, and made more famous in our age by Goethe. And she has a hand of bone and one of flesh, and she's always cold, and has a interesting arc as she, she's not our narrator, obviously. Our narrator is telling his story, but he often dreams of Walpurga and things that seem to be going on with her while he's having his own adventures. So anyways, we also learn our protagonist is named Hieronymus, and with Prospero is a knight of the Order of the Dragon. It is, I feel like, a great example of using medieval ideas and imagery in life in some way, at least that of a knight, but turned it rather dark and definitely weird. It's a vibe very much like the other things I've read by Wilcox in Old Moon and just elsewhere. This is his best yet, and the story flows easy, but retains the Baroque style without getting slowed down, though it does kind of change its tone, like slowly shifts also in like how easy it is to read. As the story progresses, it becomes a bit more weird in certain ways, a bit more cerebral, I guess you could say. And that being, it does have an archaic style that you'd read in a medieval romance, and it made me chuckle at times. It's just kind of funny, reading stuff like that. It's well done. I mean, it's not quite, it's pseudo-archaic in a sense, right? I mean, like, it's not told in verse, it's not spelled in Middle English or anything like that, but there is bonus points for using splanchomancy, and I didn't have to look up many of the words. I remember having to look up like a type of helmet and like a type of like unit in some military or something like that. So it's generally, I feel like for someone who reads stuff like this decently often, I think it was fine, and it's a good use of vocabulary. Anyways, so the blurb actually starts thus. It's about 3 paragraphs, but the first paragraph of it is, the Order of the Dragon sends its bloodiest knights, Hieronymus of Sorn and Prospero of Luchetti, to purge the heretics of the Baltic coast. Yet when death and sorcery thunder them into a realm other than their own, these paladins find themselves beset by beast, by doubt, and by their own blessed crumbling minds. So it's getting into the so-called Northern Crusades, Lithuania being the last European nation to convert to Christianity, by the way. But it's not actually Teutonic Knights here in this case. In fact, this doesn't really even matter, this crusade, because it's all in a different world and in a certain mindscape. So anyways, these are things, it's just a premise, pretty much. Anyways, these are things I really like. This whole idea that I've never written anything like this in this vein before, so I'm glad Wilcox is here to do so and do a good job of it. He cites Gene Wolfe, Cormac McCarthy, and Chretien de Troyes. Particularly, he labels this as Dark Souls-esque, which I think is accurate. Also uses the label Gothic, which I think works. And I can definitely see the souls here with, something, kind of reminds me of something like Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. A little more mind-gamey, I think, but still kind of that vibe. And Gothic is certainly a word for it. I don't think you should go in this expecting to read an 18th century romance, though. It's definitely its own thing, mixed with contemporary and medieval and early modern things. Though Gothic and romance, particularly capital R romance, a little bit lowercase r romance, aren't bad words for it. Confusing, I feel like maybe this is if you're not familiar with these terms, but hopefully you are. They're good terms to know. And the stuff before that, Dark Souls-like, is close enough than if you don't know. Anyways, I think it'd work well with audio, actually. I really think that their narration would. I'd like to see that happen. And I can definitely see where Wolfe and McCarthy are somewhere in these stories, or in the story, sorry. And it's a fun one. It's an interesting narrative structure that brings to mind somewhat Hurled Headlong Flaming by Matt Holder, which is another novella that came out earlier this year, a sword and sorcery novella that came out earlier this year. And this one is actually available soon. I got an arc of it, but it comes out on Halloween of 2024. Anyways, Liam from Liam's Lyceum. I'll catch you next time.